Cold Blood and Guts. The nickname of General George S. Patton, Jr. is an appropriate one for history's most controversial military leaders, acknowledged by friend and foe alike as a force of nature on the battlefield. I was recently rewatching the movie Patton here on YouTube and thought it would be interesting to explore the philosophical roots of Patton's thinking. Was he just a brilliant, profane, and temperamental, perhaps somewhat eccentric warrior? Or was there a deeper, more complex philosophical mix underpinning his legendary leadership? Behind the bluster and the battlefield genius, there was a man deeply engaged with history, with faith, and with a personal philosophy that both mirrored and diverged from some of antiquity's greatest thinkers. To understand Patton, you first have to understand that he believed he was a man out of time. He was an avid reader of history, devouring the works of Caesar, Napoleon, and other great military commanders. But his connection to the past was more than just intellectual, it had a mystical component. Patton was convinced he had lived before, that he was a reincarnated warrior who had fought at the siege of Troy, alongside Alexander the Great at the Battle of Tyre, and with Napoleon's legions. His belief in reincarnation was more than just some quirky personality trait. It was the bedrock of his self-concept. From his perspective, war wasn't a modern, industrialized horror, but was a timeless, almost sacred human endeavor. His infamous and often profane speeches to his troops were designed to tap into what he saw as this primal warrior spirit. He believed that within every soldier there was a dormant hero waiting to be awakened, a point he drove home in his well-known speech to the Third Army. Battle is the most magnificent competition in which a human being can indulge. It brings out all that is best, and it removes all that is base. His leadership, for good and ill, was a direct extension of this belief. He led from the front, not just out of ego, but because in his worldview, the leader was the embodiment of the warrior ideal. He had to be the most daring, the most aggressive, the most visible symbol of the fighting spirit he demanded from his men. As we know, there was a dark side to this ideal when his demanding attitude led to the infamous slapping incident, where he assaulted soldiers who were suffering from what we now call PTSD. Now let's bring in some philosophy. While Patton wasn't what we would call a formal philosopher, his actions and words often echoed certain philosophical schools. Let's start with the Stoics. The ancient Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius, preached the importance of virtue, reason, and enduring hardship without complaint. At first glance, the fiery, emotional Patton seems the antithesis of a Stoic, but let's take a look closer at this. Patton's relentless emphasis on discipline, on pushing through fear and fatigue, does have a Stoic flavor. The Stoics believed in focusing on what you can control and accepting what you can't. For a soldier in the chaos of battle, this is a powerful mental tool. Patton's insistence on immaculate uniforms, even in the mud and blood of a war zone, wasn't just about appearances. It was a form of discipline, a way for his soldiers to exert control over their immediate environment, to maintain their self-respect in the face of dehumanizing conditions. This is a practical application of a very Stoic idea that our internal state of mind is ours to command, even when the world outside is in turmoil. However, Patton's philosophy diverges sharply from Stoicism in one key area: his unbridled ambition and his thirst for glory. And this is where we can see parallels with a more controversial philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, or overman, describes a being who creates his own values, who embraces life's struggles, and who strives for greatness. The Übermensch is not bound by conventional morality. He is a force of will who imposes his vision on the world. Patton, with his relentless drive, his will to win, and his often stated belief that he was a man of destiny, certainly embodied a kind of Nietzschean will to power. He saw war as the ultimate test of a man's worth, a crucible in which greatness was forged. His famous motto, "A good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan next week," is pure, unadulterated will to action. He believed that hesitation was a form of weakness, and that decisive, aggressive action could shape reality. Now, it's important to be clear, there's no evidence that Patton was a devoted student of Nietzsche, or even that he read any of his works. But the parallels in their thinking about struggle, greatness, and the will are striking. Both saw a certain nobility in the struggle itself, in the overcoming of obstacles. Patton also had a deep, if rather unconventional at times, religious faith. He was a lifelong Episcopalian who prayed daily and regularly attended church services, even while on campaign. He often wrote in his diaries and letters about his reliance on divine assistance, stating, "No one can live under the awful responsibility that I have without divine help." Patton's faith was not passive, believing that the power of prayer was a force multiplier in military operations. Prayer, for Patton, was what bridged the gap between a well-laid plan and its successful execution in the unpredictable chaos of battle. He had little patience for sermons that he deemed uninspiring or that focused on the sorrows and inhumanity of war. He believed that a soldier's faith should be robust, courageous, and geared towards victory. He reportedly once told his chaplains that sermons should emphasize courage and that it was not a sin to kill in a righteous war, citing Old Testament examples like David and Goliath. Bottom line, Patton's religious beliefs were an idiosyncratic mix that served his life's purpose. He was a devout Christian who saw God as a direct partner in his military campaigns, a mystic who believed his soul was that of a reincarnated warrior, and a pragmatist who harnessed sermons and prayer as inspiration and justification for war. Because of this melting pot of viewpoints, some have labeled Patton's philosophical outlook as fatalist. Basically, fatalism holds that all events and outcomes are predetermined to varying degrees, and therefore inevitable in some way. Patton's fatalism was his unshakable belief that he was a man of destiny, fated for greatness in battle, something he wrote about extensively in his diaries and letters. He felt a relentless drive to work and strive to make his destiny a reality, believing that fate would present opportunities, but it was up to a person of courage and imagination to seize them. He once stated, "A man must know his destiny. If he does not recognize it, then he is lost." By this I mean once, twice, or at the very most 3 times, fate will reach out and tap a man on the shoulder. If he has imagination, he will turn around and fate will point out to him what fork in the road he should take. If he has the guts, he will take it. Patton saw fate not as something passive, something that would just happen to someone, but as something that required one's active participation. This branch of fatalism is called active or compatibilist fatalism, the opposite of inactive or lazy fatalism. So where does this leave us? How should we label Patton's philosophical outlook? The truth is that Patton's personal philosophy was a unique cocktail, a blend of his own creation. It was a philosophy forged in the crucible of his own experiences, his ambitions, and his deep reading of military history. He took the parts that resonated with his warrior soul and discarded the rest. He was a student of the classics, yet he was also a master innovator of modern mechanized warfare. He was a romantic who wrote poetry, and a ruthless pragmatist who understood the brutal calculus of war. He wasn't an academic philosopher in a dusty old library sense. Instead, he was a philosopher in and of action. His paper was the battlefield, his arguments were his tactics, and his legacy is a testament to the power of a singular, unyielding will. By studying Patton, we aren't just learning about his good and bad sides, his great triumphs and serious mistakes. We are learning about the ongoing, often uncomfortable relationship between our ideals, our personal belief system, and what happens when they align with or come into conflict with the harsh realities of the world. We are forced to ask ourselves, what do we truly believe about our fate, and how far are we willing to go to see those beliefs made real? Thanks for joining me today. If you found this exploration of the warrior's soul interesting, be sure to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments below what other historical figures would you like to see through a philosophical lens.